Good Thursday evening, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. This is Talking Stuff. I am Jeremy Birmingham. That's Andrew Ellis. We are talking about Ohio State football recruiting as per our usual arrangement. Sorry that we didn't get this episode done earlier in the week, but because Ohio State was hosting a bunch of recruiting camps, I've been in Columbus and not here in the confines of my home studio. So if you have someone that you want to blame Austin Ward for not building a home studio for me to use when I'm staying at his house. That's actually your first assignment, America. If you're out there and you're watching, listening, however you're taking this in, go on Twitter at Award Sports and ask him why he hasn't built a home studio for us to utilize at his house when we're there. Because if you remember, there's been times he's been at my house for things and he's just in the comfy confines of this little basement nook that I've turned into a studio. So that we can provide the same quality content no matter where he is. It's suspicious if you think about it. Andrew, what's good with you? How are you?
I'm good. I'm like jealous of any type of studio you have. You have like a Chris Nolan set up there, and I just like hang out in my living room. So I'm jealous of what you got.
Yeah, I don't have as many mementos as I'd like, but we'll get there. That's a Chris Nolan deep cut for you if you're out there. Normally we start the show by just like rambling incessantly about nothing important, but there's just way too much crap happening for that to happen. So let's kick it off by starting with the commitment this week, Monday night from Jalen McLean, the 4-star safety from New Jersey. Andrew, it's funny because when you think about McLean, like his recruitment was sort of out of nowhere. Ohio State was mentioned a little bit back in January and February as someone that Perry Eliano was paying attention to. Then he dropped the top 10 list and Ohio State wasn't on it. Then 2 weeks later, the Buckeyes offered. Then 3 weeks later, he visited. And then 6 weeks later, he's committed to Ohio State after his official visit. I know that neither one of us are like talent evaluators per se, but you watch film, you look at a kid and you say, hey, I like what this looks like. What do you see in the Jalen McLean highlights?
So nowadays there's like all those different terms for safeties. You know, you got adjusters, rovers, bandits, all that stuff. Like to me, when I watch him, I just think of like a strong safety. Like that's kind of what I see. Just he's a tackler. He seems like somebody who's maybe not going to be that Malik Hooker single high type of guy, but that was kind of my first thought. But yeah, his commitment, I don't want to say it came out of nowhere because last week we were talking on here and he'd kind of been flying under the radar, at least for me. And you kind of mentioned him as one of the possibilities coming out of the weekend. And you were spot on in that assessment. But yeah, I mean, they got one now and they need probably two more, we're going to say, between now and December.
Yeah, at least. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about the safety position as we move on in the show, probably actually a lot about the safety position as we move on in the show, because other than the recruiting camps that are happening on campus this week, safety recruiting is sort of the one thing that's like in the forefront right now with Zaquan Patterson's visit earlier in the week and 3 official visitors at the position this weekend. But again, we'll talk about that as we move along. The biggest question I think most people had as Jalen McLean announced his decision on Monday night was, what does this mean for other guys? And that's what we'll talk about. But the main one that people have been asking about was Reggie Powers from Centerville, Ohio, who ended up committing to Michigan State on Wednesday night. And, you know, we talked about it a little bit a week ago at the end of the last episode of Talking Stuff that we did. And there just seems to me that Ohio State felt probably that they weren't ready to go push all in there on Reggie, despite offering him a few months ago. And it seemed like there was just a constant, like, kicking the can down the road a little bit. Like there was conversation about an instant commit when he was offered. Then there was conversation about committing at the spring game. And then there was conversation about waiting till officials. And then there was conversation like, is he going to end up on an official visit? And it just seemed like the two sides decided to separate and go in different directions. Not a knock on anyone and the way they handled it. I think there is a part of the Ohio State philosophy is you don't offer kids in Ohio unless you're willing to take their commitment. But at the same time, we're in such a evolving recruiting world where offers have to come earlier and earlier, or you feel like you're not going to be able to catch up in a recruitment that teams feel at times, I think, like they're pressured into something. And that's unfortunate because they can't allow themselves to be pressured into things, but it's only human nature, I guess.
Yeah, it's just kind of wild how much the Reggie Powers recruitment has changed over the last few months. I mean, we went from thinking after the offer, like this kid could commit a couple hours from now, to now he's committed elsewhere in the Big Ten. So I think if you look at Jalen McLean's footage, I mean, that's kind of the player that I saw is like that kind of physical safety type. So like when we started to get the catch wind of McLean committing, I kind of figured this isn't good news for Mr. Powers.
Yeah, and again, we will talk about the other safeties and like who's a possible fit. I don't know that Jalen McLean fits into the Bandit or the Adjuster or the Rover or the Red Rover. I don't know what all of those are called, but I do know that he's a guy that is versatile enough to play multiple spots. But it doesn't change the fact that right now Perry Eliano, Jim Knowles, Ryan Day, etc., are starting to see this idea for who fits and what, if you're taking three safeties, what's the trio you're looking for? What are the skill sets that you're looking for? And there is to me, a relatively clear-cut trio that I'm like, man, if you can find a way to work that out, then it's pretty great. But you also go into this weekend with the three official visitors from KJ Bolden, Peyton Woodyard, and Jordan Johnson Robel from Texas. All of them are very different. KJ Bolden and Peyton Woodyard sometimes feel like they're not realistic, but again, I don't want to dive too deep into those right now because we will. But bottom line, Jalen McLean's a really good player. I don't care about the national rankings. Rivals has him as like the number 47 safety in the country. Other networks have him at like the number 7 safety in the country. I guess Ohio State fans should just be like, cool, he's number 7 in safety in the country. But truth is, he has an offer list that's extensive. Ohio State moved on him very quickly once they decided to offer. They really like his intelligence, his versatility, and his physicality. And that's why you make that move, and you risk potentially hurting a little bit a relationship inside the state of Ohio at a school in Centerville that you want to stay, healthy with. But the reality for Ohio State is that you're trying to win national championships, and you got to get the best players you get.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I agree. It seems like Ohio State's really loving those New Jersey safeties of late. Going back to the Jordan Fuller days, and then you had Jaden Bonsu, and now you got McLean. So,
yeah, this is the fourth one in since 2016. You had Jordan Fuller, Ronnie Hickman, Bonsu, and now Jalen McLean. So it's the type of player you want. You want a guy that's not afraid to stick their nose in there and hit someone, and that is a New Jersey thing. Next topic, last weekend's official visitors. 15 dudes came to town. And it's just fascinating to watch. I mean, I put in future casts on Rivals for McLean. I put one in for Marquis Lightfoot, who I think the Ohio State defensive end from Chicago. I think the Buckeyes will eventually land him over Miami and USC. It's going to be a little bit of a back and forth, but I'm going to just throw the ball to you here because I feel like I'm already talking way too much. But which guys do you want to talk about? Because you're the voice of the everyman.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one name on the list that people are asking about now is offensive tackle Brandon Baker. I think for the long time we've thought Michigan was involved there for a while, not so much anymore, although he just dropped a top 10 today. But I think most kind of feel it's coming down to Ohio State, Oregon, and then you got visits to Georgia and Texas coming up here. So we've said all along, if they can land another pure tackle prospect, that's going to go a long way for Justin Fry. He's right at the top of the board right now. And coming off the visit, it seems like there's some positive vibes. So I guess I'll ask you, is Ohio State leading for offensive tackle Brandon Baker?
I think they are today. And I think that is where you'd rather be. You'd rather be leading than trailing. I know it. I realize very, very much how dangerous it is to say what I'm about to say. I'm not really taking the next 2 weekend official visits that seriously at this point for Brandon Baker. The trip to Texas and the trip to Georgia. I think that's dangerous game to play. I know that I'm going to regret saying it, but I'm not taking those visits that seriously yet. I think it is Ohio State and Oregon at the top. I think obviously you have to deal with USC. Nebraska's been actually a pretty consistent piece of this recruitment. From talking to people around the program last weekend, people who spent a lot of time with Brandon Baker and his family, there was a different vibe than that family expected to get. And they did not anticipate feeling so normal at Ohio State, if that makes sense. Like, you're a West Coast family, you're a West Coast kid, you come to Columbus, Ohio, you spend all this time with 4 Midwest boys who are offensive linemen just like you, and to realize that they're all kind of the same and that you're like them, I think was a little bit of a shock. And I think at times people expect a West Coast kid to be, very West Coast, and you can look up or create your own definition for what that means. But that California vibe, that like laid back, I'm just a low key guy, like fits with Brandon Baker, and that is what Ian Moore and Mark Nave and Devontae Armstrong have in spades. The families really connected very well, including especially Ian Moore's family with Brandon Baker, and the fact that Ian Moore and Brandon Baker are like the number 1 and number 2 ranked offensive tackles in the country, according to Rivals.com. I think those guys like are connecting over that, like saying, hey, we could do something special here. Ohio State is a place where I think every single box was checked last weekend, and I don't think that maybe they anticipated that coming in. It's extremely telling, Andrew, that he left campus and just 2 days before arriving was saying that he was going to make a decision in late November. And then he left Ohio State's campus saying, well, maybe I can decide in August. That's telling. And now it means you have to hold on to that position if you're Ohio State. If they are, in fact, in the lead, and that's, again, my personal opinion is that they are. But even if you disagree or the people out in the ether disagree, the shift in commitment date idea signals to me that one of two things happened. That either A, he came to Ohio State and said, oh my gosh, this is everything I want, I'm changing my plans. Or he came to Ohio State and said, okay, Oregon has everything I want. I've been there 6 times. I don't need to see other schools. If Ohio State can't match them, who can? Now, I think it's interesting. He's not going to take an official visit to Oregon, so he says. And that is interesting in the fact that, I mean, he has been there 5 or 6 times, but you still, one extra trip is never a bad thing, especially for free. And not that all of his trips to Oregon aren't for free, if you catch my meaning. But it doesn't really matter. Who else?
Going over to the defensive line, what about defensive tackle IMG Academy, Jaden Jackson?
I think Jaden Jackson's one that a lot of people assumed would have committed after the weekend, doing what Jalen McLean did. And I guess I understand that. He's an Indiana kid originally. The relationship with Larry Johnson's really good. Ohio State has absolutely prioritized Jaden Jackson. That is not just like one of those throw-ins that you like, oh, well, we need to get someone, so let's find this. Like, they love this kid. And I think you have to be a little bit concerned that he's visiting Miami this weekend, and seeing how things operate down there. He's been there a couple times. He's down there at IMG. Ultimately, I think it's when Ohio State wins, period. So, yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State is leading, but you would have liked to have seen that one closed out on over the weekend, I think.
Right. So, sticking on the defensive line, you already touched on Marquis Lightfoot. Seems like Ohio State's in a good spot there. What about Darian Mayo? We don't really talk about him as much. Seems like Clemson, Michigan, maybe out in front, but where would you say Ohio State stands in that race?
If there's one player from the 15-person official visit list from a week ago that I've heard like nothing about, it's Darian Mayo. And that's not altogether unusual considering the last 6 months of his recruitment you've heard nothing about. But I think that the idea here is that Michigan is the front runner. Clemson is certainly in that conversation. But the people that have mentioned him, he said they really likes Ohio State. They really like him. But I don't know if maybe it's just one that the Buckeyes got involved or pushed a little bit too late with. He's going to be at Michigan next weekend, the weekend of the 23rd. I think that they are the team to beat there. And judging by the lack of conversation coming out of the official visit, I don't think that's changed. I mean, I will certainly admit that I could be wrong because I cannot really get a read on the kid, and nobody at Ohio State is like outwardly effusively talking about it. So that changes the way that you view it a little bit. But you like his frame. I mean, 6'7", 260. He's basically the same body as Jason Moore from the same area. You assume that those guys had a chance to catch up and link up. And when Jason Moore made his official visit to Ohio State a year ago, nobody talked about it then either. And then he committed to the Buckeyes over the longtime favorite in Notre Dame, a month later. So I'm not going to rule anything out because it is Larry Johnson's, haunting grounds in the DC, Washington, Maryland area. So, but right now the big visit looming is that Michigan one for him for sure.
Right.
But
so,
faux show.
show. Last name from last weekend's visitors. So linebacker Edwin Spillman from Tennessee. It's kind of seemed like an Ohio State-Tennessee battle. Going into the visit, I just figured Tennessee lock. Coming out of the visit, how are you feeling?
It's weird. I never thought he was a Tennessee lock per se, but certainly the idea would be that with his brother, a freshman receiver there, Nate Spillman, that Tennessee's in the lead. That it's the local team. His younger brother wants him to go to Tennessee and be with his other brother. Family certainly would like to have him closer to home. But everyone I've talked to about the Edwin Spillman visit raved about the kid. He raved about the visit in conversation with me. Like, I think he's a great fit for Ohio State. I don't like to play the percentages game. And he's going to Tennessee this weekend, so very likely you could see, we know the old adage, if you're not leading after the official visit, you're not leading, and very hard to win in that case. So I don't think Ohio State's leading, but I do think it is a neck and neck battle that, very likely will end up with Tennessee pulling away ahead of this weekend. But he's a great fit. He's one of those players that Ohio State's recruited really a long time in the class of 2024. I mean, him and Kingston Viamuasa are the two guys you're like, man, they feel like they've been recruiting these guys forever. And they have, because they started recruiting them both when they were freshmen. So there's at least some optimism coming out of Columbus that they moved the needle there. I just personally don't think that it was moved enough to make the difference.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But when you mentioned the whole, if you're not leading following the visit, you're probably not leading. That's a nice segue into our next topic, I think.
Oh, we're moving on. Bryce West.
Correct.
West, Ohio State. Andrew, Bryce West, Cleveland Glenville High School, 4-star cornerback. He's a kerner. That seems like a position in curling or something, like a kerner.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know what I'm thinking of? A curler. That's what I'm thinking of. Bryce was talking about taking a bunch of official visits, and then he visited Michigan last weekend officially, and now he's not taking any more official visits except for Ohio State. And his recruitment apparently is down to Ohio State and Michigan. This feels like your classic smokescreen in a lot of ways. And I think it's actually somewhat interesting that this smoke begins to percolate at the same time the Demarion Witten to Kentucky smoke percolated, which we'll talk about later in the show. It does feel like a smokescreen with both Demarion and Bryce making an official visit to Ohio State next weekend, the June 23rd weekend. But like we all know right now, like the Ohio State defensive recruiting feels like there's just someone's waiting for the other shoe to drop. And the Jalen McLean commitment's a great start for Ohio State to make sure that people realize like, oh, they actually are recruiting this side of the ball. There is not any sense of panic or worry or concern from Columbus about the Bryce West recruitment. And I think in some ways he wants there to be, because it makes this more fun. But, I know Steve Clinkscale and him have a good relationship. Steve Clinkscale of Michigan's defensive backs coach has done a very good job recruiting Ohio, and it's not meant to be a knock on anybody. I'm not personally taking it that seriously. And maybe we should, but I guess I'm going to have to be from Missouri on this one, because it would have to be a surprise.
Yeah, I still remember the Marshawn Lattimore and Eric Smith smoke screens for them, going to Kentucky. So those are fond memories of mine. But I don't know, as far as West goes, like you see the quotes after the, coming off the visit about 50-50 Ohio State, Michigan, that kind of thing. And I don't know. I don't really buy it. I know we got Michigan writers quote tweeting him and talking about how cute his drip is and posting yellow M emojis and weird stuff like that going on. But like we said earlier, if you're not leading after the visit, you're probably not in too great of a spot. But, he canceled the USC visit, so it's clearly two schools. We'll find out here in about 10 days or so, I guess.
What's fascinating is that he canceled the USC visit while he's in Los Angeles for the Elite 11, OT7, whatever else is going on out there. So it is a little bit weird to cancel that visit while you're out there when you're supposed to be out there for the visit. So I'm not sure if USC decided that they weren't going to do the visit or how that worked out. But bottom line is that Ohio State is and has been and will be the team to beat for the Bryce West recruitment. that said, it is a different time in recruiting right now, and the world is not the same. I've seen people posit or wonder, like, is there an issue at Ohio State and Glenville? Are they not the same? And I mean, admittedly, I think you have to acknowledge that the relationship between Ohio State now and Ted Ginn Sr. Is different than it was 15 years ago. But the reality is Ted Ginn Sr. 15 years ago was pumping out high-level Division I prospects every year. And so Ohio State was certainly more willing to facilitate anything that he asked for or needed. It's been 10 years since Ohio State signed a player from Glenville. It's been 9 years since, Frank Clark was the last one. I think it was the class of 2013. Then you had Lattimore and Eric Smith in 14. Hasn't been a lot of guys since then that were even on the radar. So it's not like Ohio State's had a lot of reason to be kissing the ring or anything like that. And I do feel in some ways that Ryan Day's philosophy is, I'm not going to let a high school coach bully me into things. And, not that anyone is attempting that, but like Ted Ginn Sr. is a very strong personality and wants his guys to do things in a very set way. And I think that Ohio State is saying, hey, if you're a kid from Ohio and you're that this is a likely choice for you, let's stop the games and get in the class and start building a class together, because it is almost July and there's 3 defensive commitments for Ohio State. And some of the conversation I've seen, Andrew, is like Bryce West saying he wants to be part of a defensive class that's a really great defensive class. And I think the Ohio State argument would be, well, then help build one and stop playing this game, right?
Right, exactly. And just as far as the whole Glenville stuff goes, they did just sign Arvell Reese, so I guess, looking forward to seeing him. But the Jamari
He's a freak,
O'Neal,
by the way.
Yeah.
He is a freak.
Yeah, I think I heard either you or Bill Landis, one of you guys, was talking about him just today, I think. Yeah. But, the Dante Whitners, Jamari O'Neals, the Ted Ginn Juniors, like those names are not being pumped out at the same rapid fire rate like they used to be. So, I think that's just the biggest reason for this kind of the lack of Glenville action that we've seen lately. Now Bryce West is a guy we've been talking about for 2+ years now, and then he's kind of always been viewed as the next one. So, I don't know. I don't have a bunch of concerns about this recruitment. He probably had a good visit at Michigan. Again, how many official visits don't go well?
Yeah, it's very rare to hear of someone leaving an official visit going, well, that shit sucked. Why did I waste my time with that? That was awful. You're treated like a king for 2 days. And I think some of the pushback or the reluctance or the hesitation is that the program at Glenville has been or was such an important part of the Ohio State program for a handful of years that right now, when you have a little bit of leverage and an opportunity to be a little bit like prominent and important, you kind of want to hold on to that as long as possible, because it's not, and we've talked about it before, it's not 2005 anymore. You don't need to have guys delay in order to get college coaches a chance to see your players. Like, the internet exists and people know everything. So there's not a lot of like, well, these other players on our team aren't going to get noticed if Purdue doesn't come to visit Glenville to see Demarion Witten, then how else are any of our players going to get seen? Like, that's just not the way the world is anymore. The internet is what it is. So anyway, Bryce West, June 23rd, official visit for him to Ohio State. Bottom line, Andrew, we're not worried. Still feel like that one's going to turn in Ohio State's favor. I'm not trying to dismiss his interest in Michigan. I really am not. I know that, like, he wouldn't be taking that official visit if he didn't like certain elements of that program. And I know that is what that's true. He does have a good relationship with Clinkscale. He does like Jim Harbaugh. He does like the way that they play defense. Like, all those things are true, but I'm still not particularly worried. Now, on the flip side of that is Aaron Scott at Springfield, who is making his official visit to Michigan this weekend and Ohio State the weekend after on the 23rd. I have been trying to caution too much optimism about the Aaron Scott recruitment without inducing panic over the last couple months, because I do feel like in the Bryce West recruitment, I'm not sure that I buy that Michigan is a legitimate contender to upend Ohio State. I do think that is the case in the Aaron Scott recruitment, just as I thought it was in the Jordan Marshall recruitment. I just thought in the Jordan Marshall recruitment that Ohio State would have time to make up any ground that they were behind. But they were behind in that case because they started late and didn't put in the effort to really prioritize Marshall as early as Michigan did. Now, we can argue all day about whether that's right or wrong. Look at the national recruiting rankings right now. I think in all of the recent updates, James Peoples is ranked ahead of Jordan Marshall. There's a lot of, you still can feel bad about missing out on an Ohio kid, but then still feel good like you have maybe a better prospect than Peoples. And then Jordan Lyle and Sam Williams-Dixon. But with Aaron Scott, Ohio State was in very, very early. They've been there from the beginning. I just think that there's a part of him that is really into the idea of doing his own thing and going his own way. I felt that in the past about other players, guys like Jackson Carman, guys like Blake Miller, when I was just like, if something just doesn't feel 100% where you want it to be. That does not mean that I think that Aaron Scott is not going to come to Ohio State. I think the most important thing for Ohio State right now, Andrew, and I'm interested in whether or not you agree, is to not be worried about who's winning today, who's leading today. The important thing is, do you get out of this weekend? Because Michigan is going to go all the way to make sure that he does not visit Ohio State on the weekend of the 23rd. The only thing that's important for Ohio State right now is to make sure that June 23rd official visit happens.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I feel like his relationship with Tim Walton is strong, and I feel like there's no reason to doubt that visit to Ohio State is going to happen. I definitely agree Michigan's a threat here. I personally figured he would have been committed to Ohio State a long time ago. That has not happened. He's talked about teaming up with Bryce West. If you're an Ohio State fan, that's probably a positive sign. But he's going to go to Michigan. He's going to have a hell of a visit. Michigan commits are going to be all over him. Michigan commits are going to be tweeting him. Michigan writers are going to be tweeting him. And there's probably going to be some future casts or crystal balls.
Is he going to have some super clean drip, though? Is he going to be drippy?
I'm guessing he's going to be quite drippy up in Ann Arbor this weekend. But, I mean, like I said, there's probably going to be some picks coming in for Michigan or picks changing from Ohio State to Michigan. And people will freak out about it a little bit. But it's all about getting him to Columbus the following weekend. And there's really no reason to think that's not going to happen.
Yeah, ultimately, that is the most important thing. Does Aaron Scott follow through with his plan, which is to make these official visits and then sit down and reassess things? Or does he allow himself to be emotionally pushed into a decision this weekend when every Michigan commitment will be in town, when they will be selling the narrative of, you can be that guy that goes from Ohio to Michigan, like, Charles Woodson or someone else in Desmond Howard, it's not Kyle Kalis. Exactly. Like, you can be that guy, or you can just be another guy who does what everyone thinks you're going to do and go to Ohio State. And that's the argument. Now, and I said this 2 months ago when I saw Aaron Scott at the Rivals Camp Series in Cincinnati. Ohio State better come up with a different pitch than just, hey, you're from Ohio. You're like, that does not work. That is not going to work for anyone anymore. Like, the world does not reward, or the world rewards that kind of loyalty. The high school recruiting process does not. No one cares about that. I do think it is worth mentioning that Oregon is not out of this picture at all. And there is a part of me that wonders if, when it comes down to making a decision, if there is a piece of Aaron Scott that decides to split the baby here a little bit and say, you know what, my family will freak out if I go to Michigan. My heart is telling me I need to go explore the world and do my own thing. Maybe Oregon's a happy medium. It's the team he grew up, with bed sheets in Oregon Duck colors. I had Oregon Duck colors when I was a kid too. That's because I was a baby and I was pooping my bed, doing all the things, So it's different now, right? I mean, you got to make decisions that are best interest long term. Maybe he decides I can just see a scenario where Aaron Scott doesn't go to Ohio State is basically what I'm saying. But I don't think it's guaranteed that it would be Michigan. I think he could actually branch off completely.
Yeah. I used to own an Oregon Ducks jersey, number 1, Sammy Parker. I thought their jerseys were sweet. It got stolen out of Shively Hall in Athens, Ohio. So cool story.
I owned This is probably the most random jersey I ever owned. It was an Eric Crouch Nebraska jersey.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. I remember finding it. I was like 18, maybe 19. So late 90s. And I found an Eric Crouch Adidas, like an official replica. You know what I mean by official replica.
Yeah.
At like TJ Maxx or something in Toledo. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll buy it. And then I don't know where it went, but it had like the patch. It was nice. I mean, he was a Heisman winner, so I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel bad wearing that. Rocked it out a little bit.
But that's crossed my mind as well with Scott. Does he just kind of settle on Oregon? But I mean, I seems like they're probably a distant third right now, if I had to guess. I don't know. Just I would caution people to not pay attention to the Twitter likes or that kind of stuff, and just pay attention to, does he show up in Columbus next weekend? And no reason to think that won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation from Ohio State as of this week was that there was no worry that he would end up skipping his official visit. I don't know if that will change over the next couple of days as Michigan really puts on the pressure to change it, but we'll see. The next topic on our list here is Demarion Witten, but I feel like we need to take a minute and just talk about this weekend's official visitors, because for some reason I might have missed that overlay on here somehow. We're still getting used to trying to do this live, folks, and it's not as easy as it seems. There's actually a lot of preparation that goes into that. It's actually much nicer to just do this and then record it and then edit it all and then publish it when I want to. But 11 official visitors this weekend, Andrew. And the question is this long shot weekend for Ohio State? Is that what this is? Does this become long shot weekend? Do I have that one down here? I thought I had it. Let's see. Did I get rid of that one? I might have. You never know. We'll go back. Who knows? This is really good live entertainment for people, I'm sure.
I can answer your question, though. I wouldn't consider it long shot weekend. I would consider it, I mean, there's a couple of big names that are coming that surprisingly we think may very well end up at Ohio State. Guys from the SEC footprint, guys in Kirby Smart's backyard. I think there's like 4 massive names that you could make an argument for either one of them being the most important visitor of the weekend.
Well, there are 4 5-stars according to like the composite rankings, right? So KJ Bolden, Dylan Stewart, Edric Houston, Kobe Black, cornerback from Texas, all coming into town. Like that's a lot of star power. And then you throw on top of that Peyton Woodyard. You throw on top of that, a player like Zabian Brown, who Ohio State's very high on. You throw on top of that Jordan Johnson-Rebel, and it's like, hey, this is actually a pretty big weekend. And that's why, like, safety, especially with Zaquan Patterson visited earlier in the week. He just got bumped up to 5-star status on Rivals.com on Monday. Now you have a weekend where Peyton Woodyard, who's a 5-star according to a couple different networks, KJ Bolden, a 5-star according to all the networks. This is a big weekend for Ohio State. If you can get KJ Bolden to buy into Ohio State while he's on this visit, while at the same time Zabian Brown is there and Kobe Black is there, all of a sudden things become very different and feel a little bit different. I saw that on the Twitter world a few days ago. I had mentioned on a morning show on the Podcast Daily, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm not sure, that Georgia put on the full court press this past weekend with KJ Bolden, 3 separate individual meetings with Kirby Smart, like really trying to get him and his family to shut it down and say, hey, I'm going to commit to Georgia. And he didn't do it. And I do think that matters. I think it mattered last year when the same thing was attempted with Caleb Downs and he didn't commit. And it was really at that point where you're like, okay, maybe he does not want to go to Georgia. I'm not saying that KJ Bolden doesn't. I'm very, very much aware of the fact that Georgia is the team to beat in this battle. But the fact that him and his family are at least willing to say, hey, let's go continue to take a look here, and is in regular conversation with Perry Eliano and Ohio State about the process. I think that's a good thing, and I don't think it should be dismissed. Ohio State's been one of those top 3 or 4 schools for KJ Bolden for the last year. It's been the same group, and now you get the final real, last swing to really try to change things in your direction, because he's already been to Clemson, he's already been to Georgia, and he's already been to Alabama. So like you have an opportunity here to really change the game with KJ Bolden. With Peyton Woodyard, I don't know. I mean, it's weird because he's been committed to Georgia for 7 months, and you feel like there's no way a kid's going to flip from Georgia, but it's also he's showing up at Ohio State. So what does that mean?
I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think Georgia has 3 safeties committed right now, with Peyton Woodyard being one of them. I mean, Ohio State has a shot with KJ Bolden. I know there's family ties to Eliano, and some people are going to say, if Ohio State misses him, how do you miss out on your cousin or second cousin or whatever? And I don't know. My expectation is he picks Georgia. My expectation is Peyton Woodyard. I don't know. I feel like I personally still have a little bit higher hopes for Peyton Woodyard than I do KJ Bolden. I could be off on that. Maybe they both just signed with Georgia, but Ohio State's getting the last shot here for Bolden, so that's a pretty big deal, like you said. I do get some Caleb Downs-ish vibes from this. Obviously, this would be a Georgia win instead of an Alabama win if it goes that direction. But I don't know. Both guys are on campus this weekend, so Perry Eliano's got a shot.
Yeah, and it's with Zabian Brown coming in, with Kobe Black coming in, with Dylan Stewart coming in, with Gerby Lambert coming in this weekend. Like, it does feel like long shot weekend, sort of, and I get where people would look at it, but that's not the impression I got from talking to people around the Ohio State program this week. They don't think that these are long shots. They know that these are some tough battles, and they know that these are some fights that they have to win to turn this recruiting class from good to potentially great. But I don't think they're entering this weekend with their head down. The battle for Edric Houston, I've been saying for months, I really thought Ohio State was the team to watch there. He just seems like a kid that loves Ohio State and loves Larry Johnson. He's scheduled to visit Alabama on the 23rd. Like, this is it's all moving parts. He doesn't want to make an announcement till August 22nd, but like, if you know that Ohio State's where you want to be, as much as Michigan's going to press Aaron Scott this weekend to not visit Ohio State's going to do the same thing this weekend with Edric Houston to get him to not visit Alabama next weekend, because even though maybe his heart is leading him toward Ohio State, once you get to Tuscaloosa, things can change. So it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, you've had Edric Houston in the class for a while, like you said, and I've always been very, pessimistic on that one. But then last week he's in Athens, and suddenly there's Ohio State vibes coming out of Athens during that official visit, which is very strange, pleasantly strange, and maybe it's telling. I don't know, but that one is probably the number one on my list as far as the importance of this weekend's visitors. Gerby Lambert's not a 5-star offensive tackle, but he's definitely high up on the board. And Ohio State, Notre Dame, Boston College, his visit plans have changed around a lot, but I'm kind of watching that one too to kind of see if Justin Fry can leave his mark there. But yeah, another big weekend.
It's a huge weekend. Again, Dylan Stewart, who, at a few months ago was receiving some Ohio State like predictions, and I said then, like, there's a long way to go here. He hasn't been back until this weekend. So it's an opportunity for Larry Johnson to really refamiliarize himself. You start to see how this defensive line group could look with Dylan Stewart, if you can get him to buy in to the idea that Marquis Lightfoot is there potentially, and Jaden Jackson, and then you have Edric Houston. Now all of a sudden you're building some momentum, and you can say, hey, if you want to be the guy to take this over the edge and take it to the next level, like, this is how you do it. That will be the pitch, I'm sure. I mean, it's easy to look at the Ohio State depth chart and point to defensive end and say, we have serious problems here and we need your help. So that, I assume that's going to be part of it as well. But Zabian Brown coming back into town, I thought Ohio State was in a really good position with him when he visited in the spring. He visited twice in 2 weeks from California. You don't do that for fun. But, now you're heading into this. Recent predictions for him have been to USC instead of Alabama, or, which was, I think, the early favorite there. So now you have to start to wonder, when Nick Saban's complaining about how much USC is spending in the NIL world, like, then you have to know that they're doing some stuff that's pretty crazy. So not that Nick Saban would ever complain. Sorry if I'm not, you weren't complaining, Nick, you were pointing it out. I'm sorry if that comes across that I'm saying you're a complainer. I'm not. What else? This weekend, as I said, Andrew, tons of camps all week, man. Like, it's been fun. It's been good. I was really impressed by Demarion Witten on Wednesday, watching him at Ohio State. And I had written on ohiostate.rivals.com heading into that camp morning that, like, I wasn't sure what to make of his recruitment, because I'm not sure really what to make of him as a player. I don't know where he fits. He's about 6'2 3/4 and just about 200 pounds. He doesn't have like the frame that you look at and you go, well, that's going to be a bigger kid. He's going to, like G. Scott, for example. When G. Scott came to Ohio State, he was a big wide receiver, and you could see the frame to add weight. Like Demarion has a slight frame, and it just doesn't look like he's got like the big bones to add a lot of weight, is what I'm saying. And after watching him on Wednesday, like he caught everything, tracked the ball really well, was extremely athletic. He ran a sub 4.6. That's really good for a high school athlete. Don't buy all the 4.5, 4.4 crap that you read on the internet. Most of it's not true. Like there's only a very few select high school football players that are running a legit 4.4. A dude running a 4.58 at Ohio State at his size is really good. And I think you have to find a way to bring him into this class. But I also wonder if Kentucky's pitch, which is Ohio State has a tight end, we don't. We only have 3 commitments. You can be our star. Like, I think that is something that's hard to ignore.
Yeah, I agree. But you're also Kentucky. You're just kind of a mid-tier SEC program. And granted, they've feasted on some of these Ohio guys over the last few years, and props to Vince Marrow and the coaching staff down there. But I'm with you on Witten. Obviously, I've never seen him live, just watched some tape, but he's kind of one of those guys that's in like a weird spot physically, like you said, whether you're talking about G. Scott, or you're talking about like going back to like an El Christian Blue Smith or a Jalen Harris, those guys that just didn't really didn't have the prototype size to be a tight end or to be a wide receiver. So Demarion Witten's not going to play wide receiver for Ohio State because Brian Hartline's there and he gets every 5-star receiver in the country. Already have a tight end committed. I heard that Keenan Bailey was working with him on like blocking and stuff like that. I'm imagining a guy who's 6'3" and 200 pounds and is more of a pass catching tight end, probably knows very little about blocking. I'm sure that's what they were watching on the other day at camp. So I don't know. Like for a while we talked about this being that 2 tight end class that we've always, has always kind of not happened. And now I'm not sure that's going to happen. So
yeah, because he just doesn't fit like you don't look at him and think, okay, he's going to be a 6'3", 225 pound H-back, like Mitch Rossi was 6'1" and 240 pounds, but he could block, he could run, catch the ball out of the backfield. He could do a lot of things. I think he's too good to not take if he wants to come to Ohio State, however you got to figure this out. If you're Keenan Bailey in the Ohio State offense, you find a role for him. To me, like the player who he kind of reminds me of, and maybe it won't be the best comparison from an Ohio State perspective for people. Do you remember Kier Hawkins from Maple Heights in the class of 2016? He was the 3rd tight end that they brought in alongside Jake Hausman and Luke Farrell. And you just said, hey, I like the athletic makeup. We'll see what we can figure out. And they didn't really ever figure anything out for Kier. And I worry that maybe that would end up happening down the road for Demarion, but he is athletically gifted enough to play at Ohio State, and that was answered for me for sure on Wednesday. Speaking of camps and gifted, worth talking about, we're recording this, editing this, doing this live. However you're getting this, we're doing it on Thursday night, which means I'm about 6 hours from being in Columbus and just got home after watching Tavian St. Clair absolutely just change people's opinions of him. I think it's fascinating. There were a lot of people in the Ohio State media world who had not seen Tavian since like last summer when he camped at Ohio State. And at that time he was like 6'2" and about 175 pounds and didn't really look like he knew what he was doing with the football. And now he shows up today at 6'4" and 215 pounds. And I'm telling you, man, like it is rare to see a player make the leap that Tavian St. Clair has made in the last 6 months. And we've talked about it before, so I don't want to beat the drum too much, but where he can go in the next couple of years is crazy. Like the upside is unlimited. And I think that I'm as convinced as I can be now that he will be the Ohio State quarterback in the class of 2025. which is going to lead to some interesting discussions because Bryce Underwood, the number 1 ranked player in the country and number 1 ranked quarterback, therefore, is very high on Ohio State. And I just personally do not think that there is a gap between him and Tavian St. Clair. And maybe I'll be accused of wearing scarlet colored glasses when I say that. But Andrew, I'm telling you, there is nothing different. There is not a moment when you look at Bryce Underwood and say, he does this better than St. Clair, and that's why he's the number 1 player. He's won a couple state championships up at Belleville in Michigan. That's cool. I understand. Bellefontaine is not the same as Belleville, but the player, the physicality, the frame, the arm talent, the attitude, the confidence, through the roof.
Yeah. I can't stop laughing at people when they say the Bellefontaine, Bell Fountain, but it's okay.
Bellefontaine, Bell Fountain.
Yeah, Bell Fountain, like Bell and then like water fountain.
Bellefontaine.
Yeah, close enough. But at this point, I would say, do you think it's fair to just straight up say that for the 2025 quarterback hierarchy, that Tavian St. Clair is number 1, like regardless of Underwood? Okay.
Yeah,
I agree.
I do. I mean, I just don't. And again, I'm not a national analyst. I'm not a talent evaluator. I do understand throwing a ball. I understand a player's confidence. I understand mental makeup. And I'm telling you, there is no discernible difference in what Bryce Underwood brings to a football team as a quarterback and what Tavian St. Clair does right now. And that's bottom line. And I don't know if Tavian will end up getting the 5-star ranking that I think he will deserve. If that kid played in Texas, if that kid played in California, he would be a 5-star prospect right now. And he wouldn't have been last year. So I understand that people are a little bit behind on updating those numbers or getting thoughts that, updated thoughts. After seeing him multiple times in the last few months, there is no doubt in my mind that that is a 5-star quarterback prospect. Like zilch, zero, nada.
Yeah, the competition is going to be the thing that people harp on over the next year. I mean, just with the way now you're getting me almost saying Bellefontaine. Just
what if we just meet in the middle and we call it Beal Fountain?
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Beal Fountain.
No, it's not. But I mean, but they're not playing the Massillons or any of those like crazy teams. So I mean, that's going to be the kind of the talking point. And he doesn't have receivers like some of the other programs in the state of Ohio or across the country. So, but if you see, and you've seen him live, if the arm strength's there, all that stuff's there. Clearly Ohio State loves him already. I know that Jonte Gilbert is committed kind of for 2025.
Ostensibly, yeah.
He's in the commitment columns at least, but is it probably, I mean, if I were to sit here and say that Tavian St. Clair is probably going to be the next guy to pop for the class of 2025, do you think that would be somewhat of a fair statement?
I mean, I think it could happen that soon. I don't know. I mean, I really think that you're going to see him consider some things. Alabama made a big impression on Tavian St. Clair when he visited there a week ago. That's sort of, if I was to throw a little bit of caution into the conversation, it would be that I think Bama is real in that debate. I think long-term, big picture, however, I don't think there's anyone who will be able to supplant Ohio State in that battle. And maybe it's, initially after he got the Ohio State offer, he was talking about like, I'll commit in a year. I would be shocked if it's not by the end of his junior season. And I would be fairly comfortable saying that it would probably be before junior season. So, and I want to be clear, like I even on the, overlay here on the screen, it talks about St. Clair and Ryan Montgomery, and these two should not be lumped into a conversation where it's a competition between the two of them. Right. Tavian's improvement does not mean that Ryan Montgomery has not improved as well. Ryan is a much bigger, better player than he was a year ago. And I don't think that there's a situation, unfortunately, where Ohio State could take them both. I think they would if they had their druthers. They would like that. I don't think Tavian nor Ryan wants that because no one wants to be a part of a 2-man quarterback class unless there are some extenuating circumstances. And in this case, there are not. But the difference right now between what St. Clair has accomplished in the last 6 months versus, and then where he can go in the next 5 years, is just different. And it's not a knock on anyone else. I love Ryan Montgomery. I think he's a great kid. I think he's going to be a successful college quarterback, and it could be anywhere in the country. But I think that watching the Ohio State camp on Thursday, it seemed pretty clear that the Buckeyes coaching staff sees the potential of Tavian St. Clair in a different way.
So as somebody who's seen them live a couple times now, or several times now, like, what would you say is what's the biggest thing that St. Clair has going for him that kind of separates him? Would you say, is it like arm strength? Is it, they both move around well from what I've seen, but is there like one thing in particular that you've noticed?
Tavian is more comfortable doing things. Does that make sense? Like he's like in the pocket, out of the pocket. He's much more, I think, at this point, just more natural in the reaction, in like making plays happen with his feet, doing things like Ryan. Ironically, like I heard on Thursday that because they were both in Ann Arbor at Michigan for camp on Wednesday, and Michigan was running some smokehouse stuff and some sprints, and Ryan beat Tavian St. Clair in those sprints. So he's not unathletic, Ryan Montgomery. I mean, he's a really good basketball player. He's 6'3", 210 pounds. Like, he's a well put together kid. I think that Tavian has just a more natural playmaking ability. And my biggest concern with Ryan right now might be that he's in his head a little bit more than he needs to be. That could be because he has been talked about in this way for the last 2 years. And maybe it's easier for Tavian St. Clair right now because this is all new. And 4 months ago, he was talking about going to visit Miami of Ohio. And now all of a sudden, like, life has changed. And so maybe there's less pressure because he's like, hey, this is great. I'm just riding the wave. But I think that's the biggest difference. I think just mentally right now, he just seems to be having a really good time with it. And I don't know if that matters in the long run. But then you look at the physical change from February to now, where he's put on 20 pounds and he looks like a 5-star quarterback. That's just what they look like. And I don't know. I think that for Ohio State's purposes and Ohio State's sake, to have him lock in a decision sometime in the near future and begin building that class from the inside out is the perfect scenario. And, it's been since 2015 since Ohio State signed an Ohio quarterback, and there's still a year and a half before Ryan Montgomery or Tavian St. Clair can make a college, decision official. But Tavian St. Clair or Ryan Montgomery, however this works out, other than Joe Burrow, like, who was the last signee at quarterback from the state of Ohio and is now the most popular person in Ohio, really, like, who else would be more important or popular in the state of Ohio than the kid who commits to Ohio State at quarterback from Ohio? Like, you can build your brand for the rest of your life and set up your family for the rest of your life if you make this decision in the near future, because you will be a hero to the state of Ohio. And that is hard to pass up.
So basically he's a cross between like Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, and like a little bit of Joe Burrow sprinkled in.
I mean, there's a touch of Tom Brady in there probably too. Just,
cool.
Maybe a little Montana. I don't know. He's really good, and he's only going to get better, and no pressure. I mean, he's not perfect. He had a couple of times on Thursday where he was, pressured and forced to throw a little bit, and you're going to learn these things, but just it's all there. And again, I don't want that to seem like Ryan Montgomery doesn't have those things, because that's not true. He is a really good young quarterback. I just think that that's what recruiting is. It's prospecting, it's projecting. And Tavian St. Clair's long-term upside just seems different to me.
Yeah. Both of these guys, and of course Bryce Underwood, are going to find themselves playing for a national title contending program. So they're all going to end up in great spots. So
I've heard so often that Georgia is really, really high on Ryan Montgomery. They came to visit Ryan Montgomery a month ago and didn't visit Tavian St. Clair. Now they're texting and saying, hey, Tavian, when can we get you down to camp? Like, they obviously like Ryan Montgomery quite a bit. If that's the case, I mean, you certainly can't go wrong if you're Ryan Montgomery playing at Georgia. So it's not a knock to say that maybe Ohio State is leaning it in a different direction. But, you have to find out what the best spot for you is, and they're all going to do that. And there's still plenty of time. They're still not even started their junior year of high school yet. So,
Right.
What else we got, Andrew? We're dialing in on an hour here of live talking stuff on the podcast. Please, if you're not a subscriber, please just hit the subscribe button and then turn on the notifications so that when we do this stuff, you can actually join us. And then maybe, just maybe, since this is free for you, gratis, you can join us at ohiostate.rivals.com and sign up using promo code DTE30 to get a free month of your subscription there, where we talk about all these things and a whole lot more on the Horseshoe Lounge message board, and you'll find all of our written work. So, 4-minute drill. Last time we did the 4-minute drill, it was like 11 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'm going to try my hand at clock management here. What do you got? What's on your mind?
Well, the Elite 11 is going on right now, as we may have briefly touched on earlier. I know Rivals.com kind of put out their rankings of the quarterbacks that are out there, all sorts of big names, Raiola, Jaden Davis, of course, Aaron Nolan's out there, and the Ohio State commitment found himself number 1 on that list. One thing I love about the Elite 11 is like you can have 10 different people go there and watch, and 10 different people can see completely different things. Like I've seen a list that had that Penn State commitment from Ohio, right? The quarterback committed listed at number 1. I've seen other lists that don't even have him listed in the top 11 or 15 or whatever, but Rivals.com has Aaron Nolan number 1. You love to see it.
Yeah. And the official Elite 11 like rankings, they had, I think, Air 3rd. He's pretty good. And the reality is, I think a lot of times those lists that you see put out by each individual network is nothing more than confirmation bias. Wherever they had someone ranked heading into the event, they're going to say that this guy was better because they had him ranked number 1 or number 2. It's a good time to remind people that every one of these guys is a 16-year-old quarterback, and they're learning a lot. The Elite 11, it sounds like a sleepover, like a camp party. They put those kids through the ringer. They throw the ball a ton over these 2 days. I'm not out there for this Elite 11 because Ohio State's in the middle of camp season, and I thought it was more important to stay in Columbus and get the time with the players coming to campus, and not necessarily the star-studded glitter fest that's out there in California. But the Elite 11 is a daunting task. Those kids throw their arms off in these couple days. And so the way that the rankings will change from the first day to the final day is generally telling, because you see who's really got mechanics to stay fresh for that long, and who's got the arm strength and the physical strength and endurance, because they're on different time zones. Like they're up at 7 a.m. doing hot yoga, then they're spending time in the ocean. Like they're just doing a bunch of weird crap. So it is a pretty interesting way to measure people. I think that just basing it on how you throw the ball driving down the field one time is stupid. But you do get a sense of who's got what. Ethan Grunkmeyer, the kid who's committed to Penn State from Olentangy, by the way, has a really, really great arm. Probably one of the better arms in the country. So Ohio State camp talk. I did put in an Ohio State future cast on Rivals.com this week for TJ Alford, who is a 2025 linebacker from Florida. He was really, really stinking good on Monday at Ohio State. Long, like 6'2", about 215, but he has an 80-inch wingspan. Like it just looked like a monster out there off the edge. And he's a player that would really impress me this week. Andrew, are there any players that like you've been reading about or hearing about from these Ohio State camps that you're like, oh, what about this dude?
Just a couple of the in-state guys that were there. I think it was today. Bo Jackson was there. I think Marquis Davis was there. I saw a couple videos of them running wheel routes. Did you see much
running
from them?
back?
Or what are
Running back's going to get interesting in 2025. I tell you,
Yes.
We have not talked about it. We're an hour in. Jordan Davison, the number 1 ranked running back in the country, visited Ohio State for 3 days earlier this week. And again, similar to the Brandon Baker situation, I think Ohio State's leading. Now, you just got to hold on to it. When Ohio State offered both Bo Jackson from Villa St. Angelo, St. Joseph's, I don't know all the words, how they put them together, Bellefontaine, and then Marquis Davis from Cleveland Heights. Like, you have 2 really, really good players in the state. They want 2 running backs in that class, so that's the starting point. But now you have to discern, like, how do you figure out what the best way to go is? Because if a player like Jordan Davison, who again is the number 1 ranked running back in the country and a top 10 player in the country from California, from Mater Dei, a high school you've been trying for years to infiltrate, if he wants in, you can't say no. But if Jordan Davison doesn't want to make a decision anytime soon, and Marquis Davis or Bo Jackson does, then do you have to say, hey, let's hold off because we want Davison to be the first guy in if he wants to get in, because otherwise you take a kid from Ohio and then maybe Jordan Davison's like, well, I don't want to be the second guy. And even though he would know he wouldn't be, but that's the pitch that you have to deal with. So it gets interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Those were the 2 guys that were at the top of my list.
They're both really good. They're both really good. They're both big. They're bigger than that you'd think for running backs who are going into their junior years. Like they both bulked up pretty good, both about 215 pounds. And I think you could mistake either one of them for a linebacker, which is good. You want running backs who are punishing, and they certainly that. Tony Alford had a great group on Thursday, including this, Torrey Blaylock from Texas, and the kids from Ohio. You got a couple other big time names from around the country. So it was a really good week of camp. Looking forward to more of that next week. We've got camp on Tuesday, and then the 7-on-7 camp for Ohio high schools on Wednesday. That will be the next time we see Tavian St. Clair and Ryan Montgomery both in attendance, because they'll both be there with their high school teams, Ryan Montgomery and Findlay, and Tavian St. Clair and Bellefontaine.
Nailed it.
So, like, there's still a lot of football to go, but okay. So here we are. It's an hour into the show. I want to take 3 questions from commenters, and we're going to just do our best here in figuring out the best ones. There's a lot of talking, and folks, I apologize if I haven't really been responding to the conversation here. Quick answer. Someone, RK, said, is Keenholz on campus yet? Lincoln Keenholz, 2023 quarterback signing. Yes, he is. Spent a lot of time talking to Lincoln Keenholz on Thursday, by the way, and he was a great kid. Really do like him.
You guys spent a lot of time talking about Keenholz this morning, wasn't it, on the Daily?
I did. There's just so much. There's just a vibe around that kid, man. People just love him. Let's see. We talked about Drowsy Dragon asked if there's a realistic chance with Bolden, or is he going to Georgia? So we did talk about it on the show, but yeah, I do think that there's a realistic chance. I think if he was going to Georgia, he would have committed to Georgia already. There's so many opportunities to do it. He's been there 400 times. Like, at some point, what someone does matters. And now I'm not saying he won't end up going to Georgia, but the simple truth is, I know for a fact that Georgia attempted to get him to shut things down last weekend. And then I know that people then say, well, I've read quotes where Kirby Smart told him to go enjoy his other visits. Of course he did. Once he wasn't going to commit, what are you going to say? I hope that your next trip sucks. Your family's dead to me. Dead to me. Let's see. I don't know, man. There's questions. It's hard to figure out what to ask, because I don't want to ask it. I want Andrew to answer it. King Joseph Edwards still tweeting about being at Ohio State. That's not one to pay attention to, folks. I don't think that that's a real Ohio State interest in King Joseph Edwards.
I forgot about that kid.
Andrew, do you have? Okay, I'm not seeing anything that, like. Here's one. This one I know is up your alley. This is from Lucas Abner. Considering that we think Aaron Scott is going to be a Buckeye, but he does love to like and retweet a lot of Michigan stuff on social media, what do you think about that?
I think he's a teenager on social media. I don't know. I see it, I notice it, but I don't pay much attention to that. I really don't. I mean, I pay attention to it, but I know it doesn't really.
Yeah, I pay all the time.
I pay a lot of attention to it, but I don't think it actually means anything. So,
folks, if I could tell you how much Andrew pays attention to everything that happens on social media, you would wonder about his mental health, and you'd be fair to do so. I think you'd be totally fair to do so. I've Reed asks, is Bryce West and Aaron Scott in the class? I don't know. I don't think so. Not yet. Neither one of them is committed. We did talk about it earlier in the show. We think that the Bryce West and Michigan stuff is sort of a smokescreen, but not something that should be completely ignored, but not maybe made into a big deal. And then Ohio State has to get through this weekend with Aaron Scott visiting Michigan and take their final swing with him next week. I think Michigan has a slight probably advantage in that fight right now. That's just my opinion. Clayton asks, is this going to be a bigger class, like 25 plus commits? I think that you could make a case for it to be that way. Ohio State has a potential to lose like 20 some dudes to the NFL draft after this year. So there will certainly be some opportunity for a big class. But Andrew, this will be the last question. Do you think that places like Ohio State need to adjust their philosophy and save a certain number of spots in a class every year for the transfer portal now that it's become so relevant?
I don't think you really need to save spots because you're going to have guys exiting. You know what I mean? So I don't really think you need to, if you can fit 27 guys in your recruiting class, I don't think you need to cut that down to 25 just so you can take 2 from the portal, because you got to figure, you're going to have your 8th wide receiver on your depth chart like we saw happen recently. Those guys are going to exit, which will give you some room to bring guys in. So I don't really think so.
I think it should be a bigger class. I would expect it to be 25 or more to answer that question from my perspective. Right now they're at 14 commitments and they only have 3 defensive commitments. So you figure that you get to double digits on both sides of the ball. They're considering a special teams addition at kicker. I think that you still look to add 1 or 2, 3 more guys at least on offense. With a pair of wide receivers that you're still looking for at Elijah Moore and Jeremiah McClellan. You hope that you add Brandon Baker and another offensive lineman. That takes you to 17. And then after that, without any other defensive additions, you're going to get to 25 pretty comfortably, I think, in the class of 2024 for Ohio State.
One more thing.
What? Yeah.
Last thing for you. Aaron Scott, in or out right now, would you say? Let me tell you before you answer.
Why would you do that?
Before you answer, he just tweeted pictures of apparently his Michigan hotel room or something with several yellow M's. So keep that fact. Let that marinate.
That's drippy. That's drippy.
Answer. Very drippy.
I believe that Michigan is leading in that battle probably by a sliver at the moment. So the question is, how big can they separate that this weekend? And he has said over and over that he will return to Ohio State for his official visit. I believe him. I think that if he does that, Ohio State still has enough clout and enough of a attachment for him that he will end up at Ohio State. So I'm going to still say in, but it is not a comfortable in. Okay. This is not like a comfortable thing. So big weekend for everyone. Ohio State has 11 official visitors. Big time players for Ohio State's board visiting elsewhere. Marquis Lightfoot, Jaden Jackson, kids taking trips all around the country. The OT7 happening in LA, the Elite 11 happening in LA. Ohio State hosting a bunch of camps. We're in the middle of the funnest part of the recruiting calendar, and I appreciate everyone watching and listening and spending some of the time breaking that down with us. That's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. This has been Talking Stuff on the podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, rate, review. Join us at ohiostate.rivals.com, and goodbye.